My name is Nathan Granger, and I always thought I was pretty good at reading people. 20 years in crisis management and counterintelligence will do that to you. You learn to spot lies, decode body language, and detect the subtle shifts that signal betrayal. What I never expected was that all those skills would fail me when it came to my own wife. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in October. I was in my home office, reviewing classified client files for my crisis PR consulting firm when I heard Claire giggling downstairs. Not unusual, she laughed a lot. What made me pause was the tone. It was the kind of laugh she used to give me during our early dating years, breathy and intimate. I saved my work and walked downstairs to find her on the couch with Trevor Lynn, supposedly her best friend since college. They were sitting closer than necessary, her hand resting on his arm as she leaned into him while showing something on her phone. "Hey," I said, stepping into the living room. "Didn't hear you come in, Trevor." Claire looked up, and for just a split second, I caught something in her expression. Guilt? Annoyance? It was gone so fast I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Trevor was just telling me about this hilarious case at his firm," she said, moving slightly away from him but keeping her hand on his arm. "You know how lawyers can be." Trevor smiled that perfect smile of his, the one that had helped him make partner at Morrison, Blake & Associates by age 38. "Just some client drama, Nate. Nothing as exciting as your spy stuff." I wasn't a spy, but I'd learned not to correct people. My work in crisis management often involved corporate espionage cases, and my background in military counterintelligence made me valuable to companies dealing with information theft. The mystery made clients more willing to pay premium rates. "Speaking of which," Claire said, standing up and smoothing her skirt, "Trevor was asking about your client confidentiality protocols, for his corporate clients." Something cold settled in my stomach. My protocols weren't just trade secrets, they were worth millions. I'd developed proprietary methodologies for crisis management that Fortune 500 companies paid top dollar to access. The information was stored in encrypted vaults that only I could access. "That's pretty specialized stuff," I said carefully. "Why the interest?" Trevor shrugged. "Just curious about how the other side works. Know your enemy and all that." The word enemy hung in the air a moment too long. "Well," I said, "I should let you two catch up. I've got some files to review." As I headed back upstairs, I heard Claire's laugh again, that same intimate sound that had stopped me before. At the top of the stairs, I paused and looked back. Trevor's hand was now on Claire's knee, and she wasn't moving it away. That night, after Trevor left, I tried to bring it up casually. "Trevor seemed interested in my work tonight," I said as Claire brushed her teeth. "Did he?" she said through a mouth full of toothpaste. I wasn't really paying attention. But she had been paying attention. Very close attention. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Claire would get text messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. She'd excuse herself to take phone calls, claiming it was work, but I could hear her laughing in that same breathy way. And Trevor started showing up more often, always with some excuse about needing advice or wanting to hang out. The breaking point came 3 weeks later at a dinner party at our neighbor's house. I was talking with Jim Peterson about his landscaping business when I looked across the room and saw Claire and Trevor by the wine bar. They weren't just talking. They were in their own little bubble, completely oblivious to the rest of the party. Claire had her hand on Trevor's chest, laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. His hand was on her lower back, fingers spread in a way that was definitely not platonic. They looked like lovers trying to pretend they were just friends. I excused myself from Jim and walked over to them. "Having a good time?" I asked. Claire jumped slightly and moved her hand away from Trevor's chest. "Oh, hi, honey. Trevor was just telling me about his trip to San Francisco last month." "The one where you had that conference?" I asked Claire. She'd been gone for 4 days in October, supposedly for a tech startup conference. "Different trip." Trevor said quickly. I was there for depositions. But Claire's face had gone pale. Actually, I think I need some air, she said. It's getting warm in here. She walked toward the patio doors, and Trevor followed her. I stayed where I was, watching through the glass as they stood close together on the deck, having what looked like an intense conversation. That's when I knew for certain my wife was having an affair with her best friend. But I'm not the kind of man who acts on suspicion alone. I needed proof. The next morning, while Claire was in the shower, I accessed her laptop. She'd always been careless with passwords, using the same one for everything. Her email was clean, but that didn't surprise me. If she was smart enough to have an affair, she was smart enough to use a different communication method. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Hidden in a folder labeled Work Backup was an export file from a dating app called Discreet Meet. The file contained hundreds of messages between Claire and Trevor going back 13 months. 13 months of explicit conversations, photo exchanges, and detailed planning of their meetings. But that wasn't the worst part. Mixed in with their romantic messages were conversations about my work. Trevor asking specific questions about my client list, my methodologies, my security protocols, Claire promising to get him information, joking about how easy it was because I trusted her completely. My hands were shaking as I read message after message detailing their betrayal. Not just of our marriage, but of my business, my clients, my life's work. The most recent exchange was from 2 days ago. Trevor: did you get the Morrison Industries file? Claire: uploading to the shared drive now. Nate has no idea. He actually thanked me for organizing his office last week. Trevor: you're incredible. This is worth at least $200K to Steinberg and Associates. Claire: just promise me we'll be together when this is all over. Trevor: of course, baby. Once we have enough to start our own firm, we'll dump our dead weight and start fresh. Dead weight. That's what I was to my wife of 15 years. I took screenshots of everything, uploaded them to my own secure server, then closed the laptop and sat in my office chair, staring at the wall. Claire had been selling my proprietary crisis management protocols to Trevor's competitors. Information that had taken me decades to develop, that my clients trusted me to protect, was being sold to the highest bidder by my own wife. The shower was still running. I could hear Claire humming, probably thinking about Trevor and their plans for my destruction. I opened my encrypted vault system and ran a security audit. The timestamps told the story. Claire had been accessing my files for months, always when I was traveling or working late. She'd copied everything: client lists, methodologies, even classified government contracts from my previous life in counterintelligence. The financial damage was in the millions. The personal betrayal was incalculable. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. If 20 years in crisis management had taught me anything, it was that information was power, and timing was everything. I spent the next week gathering evidence, bank records showing unusual deposits into an account Claire thought I didn't know about, phone records confirming her location during her supposed business trips. She'd been with Trevor every time. Security footage from his apartment building showing her coming and going at all hours. By the time I was finished, I had enough evidence to destroy them both professionally and personally. The confrontation finally came on a Friday evening. I'd been working late, deliberately staying at the office until I knew Claire would be expecting me home for dinner. When I walked through the front door at 8:30, she was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and a guilty expression. "You're late," she said, not getting up to greet me. "Client emergency," I replied, setting down my briefcase. "You know how it is?" "Actually, Nate, I don't think I do know how it is anymore." She took a sip of wine and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. "We need to talk." I sat down across from her, my heart pounding but my face calm. "About what?" "About us. About how we've grown apart. About how you're never here and when you are, you're distracted by work." It was classic projection, accusing me of the distance she'd created through her betrayal. "I work hard to provide for our family," I said evenly. "Do you? Or do you work hard to avoid dealing with the fact that our marriage is over?" The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "Is that what you think?" "It's what I know." She leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, the expensive one she only wore for special occasions, or for Trevor. "I've been thinking about this for months, Nate. We're not happy. We haven't been happy for a long time." "And you've decided this on your own?" "I've had help thinking it through," she said, and there was something almost cruel in her smile. "Trevor's been a good friend, helping me see things clearly." There it was. She was going to make Trevor the hero of this story, the supportive friend who helped her realize her marriage was broken, rather than the predator who'd helped her break it. "Trevor," I repeated slowly. "He's been there for me when you haven't been. He listens to me, Nate. He sees me as more than just a convenience." I could feel my carefully maintained composure starting to crack. "A convenience? That's all I am to you, isn't it? Someone to manage your home life so you can focus on your precious work. Someone to organize your files and keep your schedule and pretend to be interested in your spy games." The mention of organizing my files was like a red flag. She was taunting me with her theft, confident that I was too trusting to have discovered it. "Claire," I said carefully, "what exactly are you saying?" She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured suburban street. "I'm saying that I want more than this. I want passion, excitement, someone who values me for who I am, not what I can do for them. Someone like Trevor." She turned back to me, and for the first time, her mask slipped completely. I saw the guilt, the defiance, and underneath it all, the fear of being caught. "Maybe," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Would that bother you?" It was a test. She wanted to see if I suspected, if I cared enough to fight for our marriage, or if I was as emotionally dead as she'd convinced herself I was. "It would bother me if my wife was having an affair," I said quietly. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. "An affair? Is that what you think this is about? Isn't it? God, you're paranoid." "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Nate. You can't trust anyone. You see conspiracies everywhere. It's exhausting." More projection, more gaslighting. She was trying to make me doubt my own perceptions, to make me feel crazy for noticing what was right in front of me. "So you're not having an affair with Trevor?" "I'm having conversations with a friend who actually cares about my happiness. If you're so jealous of that, if you can't handle me having male friends, then maybe you should think about what that says about you." She was good. I had to give her credit. She was turning this around, making me the villain for suspecting her, making me the one with trust issues and insecurity. "Claire," I said, standing up, "I know about the dating app." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "What dating app?" "Discreet Meet. 13 months of messages between you and Trevor. Should I read some of them out loud?" For a moment she looked like she might collapse. Then her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Pure, cold hatred. "You went through my personal files?" "I went through files on a computer I pay for, in a house I pay for, used by a wife who's been stealing from me for over a year." "Stealing?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everything in this house belongs to both of us, Nate. Community property, remember? Not my client files. Not my proprietary business information. Not classified protocols that you've been selling to Trevor's competitors." Now she did look like she might collapse. She sank back into her chair, wine glass trembling in her hand. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. "Steinberg and Associates, $200,000. Morrison Industries files. Should I go on?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. When she looked up, The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by a stranger with cold eyes and a cruel smile. So what are you going to do about it, Nate? Call the police? Have your own wife arrested? Destroy our daughter's life because you can't handle being outsmarted? Our daughter. Lily was at a sleepover tonight, but Claire was right. Whatever happened next would affect her too. I could have you prosecuted for corporate espionage, I said quietly. Industrial theft, wire fraud. You'd be looking at serious prison time. But you won't, she said confidently, because you're not that kind of man. You're weak, Nate. You always have been. You hide behind your computers and your protocols and your mysterious past, but when it comes to real life, to real confrontation, you fold. She stood up and walked over to me, close enough that I could smell the wine on her breath. Besides, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, who says I was working alone? Trevor's a partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. He has connections you can't imagine. If you try to destroy me, you'll destroy yourself in the process. It was a threat. She was threatening me with Trevor's influence, with his ability to damage my reputation and my business. So here's what's going to happen, she continued. You're going to pretend this conversation never happened. You're going to go back to your office and your files and your lonely little life. And I'm going to continue seeing Trevor because he makes me happy in ways you never could. She turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at me with that cruel smile. And if you're so jealous, you can always leave. The door will always be open. It was the ultimate dismissal. She was telling me that I was so worthless, so replaceable, that she didn't even care if I left. The door would always be open because she was confident I'd never have the courage to walk through it. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at this woman who'd shared my bed for 15 years, who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd just told me she'd been systematically destroying my life and didn't care if I knew it. Then I walked to the front closet and grabbed my coat. "What are you doing?" Claire asked, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in her voice. "Taking you up on your offer," I said, pulling on my jacket. "The door's always open, right?" I picked up my car keys from the hall table and headed for the front door. "Nate, wait," Claire said, following me. "I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said," I replied, my hand on the doorknob. "You want me gone. You want to be with Trevor. You want your freedom. But we need to talk about this rationally," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "We need to think about Lily, about the house, about how you've been stealing from me for over a year, about how you've been planning to leave me once you've destroyed my business, about how I'm just dead weight you're planning to dump." Her face went white. She'd forgotten about that particular message exchange. "Nate, please," she said, reaching for my arm. "Don't do this. Don't leave like this." I looked at her hand on my sleeve, then up at her face. For just a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, frightened and vulnerable, and realizing she'd made a terrible mistake. Then I remembered the messages, the theft, the months of lies and betrayal. "You said the door would always be open, Claire. Let's see if you really meant it." I opened the door and stepped out into the cold October night. Behind me, I heard Claire gasp, "Nate, no, come back. We can work this out." But I was already walking to my car. I got in, started the engine, and backed out of the driveway. Through the windshield, I could see Claire standing in the doorway, her face pale with shock and fear. As I drove away, I heard the front door slam shut behind me. The sound echoed in my mind as I drove through our quiet suburban neighborhood, past the perfectly maintained lawns and the warm, glowing windows of houses filled with families who weren't falling apart. Claire had called my bluff, but she'd forgotten one important thing. I wasn't bluffing. I spent that first night in a hotel downtown, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had just happened. Claire had sent 17 text messages and left 9 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. I didn't respond to any of them. By morning, I had a plan. The first call I made was to Janelle Morrison, my cyber forensics specialist, and one of the few people I trusted completely. We'd worked together on dozens of cases involving corporate espionage and data theft. If anyone could help me understand the full scope of Claire and Trevor's betrayal, it was her. Nate? Janelle's voice was concerned when she answered. It's Saturday morning. This better be good. I need your help, I said. Personal matter, but it involves corporate espionage. Can you meet me at the office? Give me an hour. Janelle arrived with coffee and her laptop bag, taking one look at my face and setting up her equipment without asking questions. I'd worked with her for 5 years, and she'd learned to read my moods. Okay, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. What's the situation? I told her everything. The affair, the stolen files, the evidence I'd already gathered. She listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. Jesus, Nate, she said when I finished. Your own wife? My own wife, I confirmed. The question is, how bad is it? What exactly did she take and where did it go? Janelle cracked her knuckles and opened her laptop. Let's find out. What we discovered over the next 6 hours was worse than I'd imagined. Claire hadn't just stolen files randomly. She'd been methodical, systematic. Every major client, every proprietary protocol, every piece of classified information I'd accumulated over 2 decades of work. Look at this, Janelle said, pointing to her screen. She accessed your vault system 47 times over the past 13 months. Always when you were out of town or working late. She knew your schedule better than you did. The timestamps told a story of calculated betrayal. Claire had been planning this for over a year, carefully building a complete copy of my business while pretending to be a loving wife. Where did it all go? I asked. Janelle pulled up another screen showing network traffic logs. Multiple destinations. Steinberg and Associates got the Morrison Industries files, like you saw in the messages. But there's more. Blackstone Legal Services, Crawford and Partners, even some overseas firms. She was selling to multiple buyers? Looks like it. And the amounts? Janelle whistled low. Nate, we're talking about at least $300,000 in confirmed payments. Probably more that we can't trace yet. I felt sick. My life's work, the methods I'd developed to help companies protect themselves from exactly this kind of theft, had been sold to the highest bidders by the person I trusted most. There's something else, Janelle said, her voice grim. The access logs show she wasn't working alone. Someone else was in your system using her credentials but from different IP addresses. Trevor? That's my guess. Look at this. She showed me a series of access attempts from an IP address registered to Morrison, Blake, and Associates. He was in your system directly, not just receiving files from Claire. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just an affair that had led to opportunistic theft. This was a coordinated attack on my business, planned and executed by 2 people I'd trusted. What's our next move? Janelle asked. I leaned back in my chair, thinking. Claire expected me to either come crawling back or disappear quietly. She was counting on my love for her, or my desire to avoid confrontation, to protect her from the consequences of her actions. She was about to learn how wrong she was. First, we document everything, I said. I want a complete forensic report showing exactly what was taken, when and where it went. Second, we trace the money. I want to know every payment, every account, every financial transaction related to this theft. And then? Then we let the professionals handle it. Monday morning, I walked into the offices of Chen, Patel and Associates, the law firm that handled my business contracts. David Chen had been my attorney for 8 years, and he'd seen enough corporate espionage cases to understand the implications immediately. This is federal, he said after reviewing Janelle's report. Wire fraud, computer fraud, theft of trade secrets. If the government contracts are involved, we could be looking at espionage charges. What are my options? You could file a civil suit, but frankly, that's not going to be enough. This is criminal activity. You need to report this to the FBI. The FBI. I'd worked with federal agents before, back in my counterintelligence days. I knew how seriously they took cases involving the theft of classified information. There's something else you should know, David continued. I did some research on Trevor Lynn and Morrison, Blake and Associates. They've been involved in several questionable deals over the past year. Nothing proven, but there are rumors about information trading and client poaching. What kind of rumors? The kind that suggest your wife and her boyfriend weren't their first victims. That afternoon, I sat in a sterile conference room at the FBI field office, across from Special Agent Sarah Martinez and Agent Tom Bradley. I'd brought copies of everything: the forensic report, the financial records, the dating app messages, even security footage of Claire entering and leaving Trevor's apartment. Agent Martinez reviewed the documents with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen this kind of case before. Agent Bradley took notes and asked clarifying questions about my security protocols and client base. Mr. Granger, Agent Martinez said finally, this is a substantial case. The financial damages alone put this in federal jurisdiction, but the involvement of classified government contracts makes it a national security issue. What happens next? We open an investigation. We'll need to interview you extensively, examine your computer systems, and coordinate with the cybercrime task force. This could take months. And my wife? If our investigation confirms what you've shown us here, Mrs. Granger and Mr. Lynn will face federal charges. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years. Computer fraud, another 20. Theft of trade secrets, 10 years. If we can prove the classified material was involved, we're talking about espionage charges. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Claire had made her choice when she decided to steal from me. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. There's one more thing, Agent Bradley said. We're going to need you to act normally for the next few weeks while we build our case. Don't let them know we're investigating. You want me to go home? Pretend nothing happened? Not exactly, Agent Martinez said. We understand your marriage is over, but we need them to think you're handling this privately, not involving law enforcement. Can you do that? I thought about Claire's 17 desperate text messages, her assumption that I'd either forgive her or disappear quietly. I can do that, I said. That evening, I finally responded to Claire's messages with a simple text. We need to talk. I'll be home at 8. When I walked through the front door, Claire was waiting in the living room, just like she had been on Friday night. But this time, she looked nervous, uncertain. Nate, she said, standing up quickly. Thank God you're okay. I was so worried. Were you? I asked, setting down my briefcase. Or were you worried about what I might do with the information I have? Her face fell. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can... Claire, I said quietly, there's no we anymore. You made that decision when you started stealing from me. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. It started as just curiosity. Trevor was asking questions about your work, and I thought I was helping him understand. You thought you were helping him steal $300,000 worth of my intellectual property? She flinched. You don't understand. Trevor said it was just research, that he needed to understand how crisis management worked for his own clients. I didn't know he was selling the information. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The dating app messages made it clear she'd been a willing participant from the beginning. Where is Trevor now? I asked. I don't know. He's been distant since Friday night. He won't return my calls. Of course he wouldn't. Trevor was smart enough to know that I'd discovered their scheme. He was probably already working on damage control, maybe even planning to throw Claire under the bus to save himself. Claire, I said, sitting down across from her. I want you to listen to me very carefully. What you and Trevor did wasn't just adultery. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a federal crime. Her face went white. Federal? Wire fraud, computer fraud, theft of trade secrets. Some of the information you stole came from classified government contracts. Do you understand what that means? She was shaking now, her hands trembling as she reached for a tissue. Nate, please. I made a mistake. I'll give the money back. I'll do whatever you want. It's not up to me anymore. What do you mean? I looked at this woman who'd shared my life for 15 years, who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way, who was now begging for mercy she didn't deserve. I mean that some mistakes can't be undone, Claire. Some doors, once you walk through them, don't lead back to where you started. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when she realized I wasn't going to save her. You bastard, she whispered. You're going to destroy me. No, I said, standing up. You destroyed yourself. I'm just not going to help you hide it anymore. I walked toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at her. Oh, and Claire? You were right about one thing. The door is always open. But these days, it leads somewhere you really don't want to go. As I headed upstairs to pack more clothes, I could hear her crying behind me, but I felt nothing. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd tried to destroy my life for money and a man who was already abandoning her. Claire had wanted her freedom. She was about to get more of it than she'd ever bargained for. 2 weeks later, I was settled into a furnished apartment downtown, close to my office and far from the suburban life Claire and I had built together. Lily was staying with me on weekends, and while she was confused about the separation, she seemed to sense that something serious had happened between her parents. I was careful not to say anything negative about Claire in front of our daughter, but Lily was 14 and smart. She could feel the tension, see the fear in her mother's eyes, notice that Trevor had suddenly stopped coming around. The FBI investigation was moving faster than I'd expected. Agent Martinez called me on a Tuesday morning with an update. We've executed search warrants on Morrison, Blake & Associates and Mr. Lynn's personal residence, she said. We found extensive evidence of the information trading scheme. What kind of evidence? Client files that match your stolen protocols, financial records showing payments from multiple law firms, and communications between Lynn and at least 6 different buyers. This wasn't just about your information, Mr. Granger. They were running a full-scale industrial espionage operation. The scope kept expanding. What had started as a personal betrayal was turning into a major federal case involving multiple victims and millions of dollars in stolen intellectual property. There's more, Agent Martinez continued. We found evidence that Lynn was also stealing from his own firm. He was selling client information to competitors, using his position to facilitate insider trading, even helping clients commit fraud. What about Claire? She's more involved than she initially claimed. The financial records show she wasn't just a go-between. She was actively recruiting other sources, using her social connections to identify potential targets. I felt sick. Claire hadn't just betrayed me. She'd turned into a professional criminal. When will you make arrests? Soon. We're coordinating with the District Attorney's Office and the State Bar Association. Lynn will face criminal charges and disbarment proceedings. Your wife will face federal charges for her role in the conspiracy. That afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Ron Castellanos, Trevor's associate at Morrison, Blake & Associates. I'd met him a few times at social events, a nervous, ambitious lawyer who always seemed to be trying too hard to impress everyone. Nate, he said, his voice shaky, I need to talk to you. It's about Trevor and Claire. What about them? Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere private? We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from the legal district where Ron might be recognized. He looked terrible, pale, sweating, constantly checking over his shoulder like he expected someone to be watching him. Ron, I said, sitting down across from him. What's going on? Trevor's in full panic mode. he said, leaning forward and lowering his voice. He knows something's coming. He's been shredding documents, wiping computer files, moving money around. How do you know this? Because he's been asking me to help him. He wants me to lie to investigators, to say I was the one who had access to certain files. He's trying to set me up as the fall guy. I studied Ron's face. He was terrified, but there was something else. Anger, resentment at being used by someone he'd trusted. Why are you telling me this? Because I know what really happened. I know about the stolen files, the payments, all of it. Trevor bragged about it, said he was too smart to get caught. He called you a naive fool who was too trusting to protect his own business. The words stung, but I kept my expression neutral. What else did he say? He said Claire was surprisingly useful for someone so desperate for attention. He laughed about how easy it was to manipulate her, how she'd do anything to feel important and desired. Now I understood why Ron looked so angry. He'd seen Trevor's true nature, the calculating predator beneath the charming exterior. There's something else, Ron continued. Trevor's been planning to disappear. He's got offshore accounts, a fake identity, even a house in Costa Rica. He's been preparing for this day for months. And Claire? Ron's expression darkened. He calls her collateral damage. He never had any intention of leaving his wife for her. He was using her to get to your information, and now that the heat's on, he's planning to let her take the fall while he disappears. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was satisfied that Claire was about to learn the truth about her lover, but part of me, the part that had loved her for 15 years, felt sorry for her. Why should I believe you? I asked. Ron pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages between him and Trevor. The messages confirmed everything he'd told me. Trevor's panic, his attempts to destroy evidence, his plans to flee the country. I'm not going to prison for him, Ron said firmly, and I'm not going to let him get away with destroying innocent people's lives. What do you want from me? Help me contact the FBI. I want to cooperate, but I need protection. Trevor's dangerous when he's cornered, and he knows I can destroy him. I called Agent Martinez from the coffee shop. Within an hour, Ron was in federal custody, not as a suspect, but as a cooperating witness whose testimony would be crucial to the case. That evening, I was in my apartment reviewing case files when my phone rang. It was Claire, and she sounded hysterical. Nate, you have to help me, she said, her words tumbling over each other. Trevor's gone. He's not answering his phone. His office says he's on vacation, but his wife doesn't know where he is. Claire, I think he's left me, Nate. I think he's abandoned me, and I don't know what to do. The FBI called today. They want to interview me tomorrow. I'm scared. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the dating app messages, the stolen files, the months of systematic betrayal. You should get a lawyer, I said. I can't afford a lawyer. All my money is tied up in accounts that Trevor set up, and now I can't access them. He changed all the passwords. Of course he had. Trevor was cutting all ties, eliminating any connection between himself and the crimes he'd committed. Claire had been useful to him, but now she was a liability. Claire, there's something you need to understand. Trevor was never going to leave his wife for you. You were just a tool he used to get to my information. That's not true, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ron Castellanos is cooperating with the FBI. He's told them everything about Trevor's operation, including what Trevor really thought of you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What did he say? She whispered. That you were surprisingly useful and collateral damage? I heard her gasp, then the sound of crying. Nate, she said through her tears, I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I hurt you and betrayed your trust. But please, you have to help me. I'm your wife. We have a daughter together. You stopped being my wife the day you decided to steal from me, I said. And as for Lily, she'll be fine. She'll be better off without a mother who's in federal prison. You can't mean that. I mean every word. You made your choice, Claire. You chose Trevor over me, money over our marriage, crime over honesty. Now you get to live with the consequences. But I love you, she said desperately. I never stopped loving you. Trevor was he made me feel special, important. But you're my husband. You're the father of my child. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything, I said, until you threw it away. I hung up and turned off my phone. I'd heard enough lies, enough manipulation, enough attempts to make me responsible for fixing the mess she'd created. Claire had wanted excitement, passion, someone who valued her. She'd found Trevor, who'd used her and discarded her like a broken tool. She'd wanted freedom from our boring suburban life. She was about to get more freedom than she'd ever imagined. The freedom that comes with having nothing left to lose. The next morning, Agent Martinez called with news I'd been expecting. We arrested Trevor Lynn at Logan Airport, she said. He was trying to board a flight to Costa Rica using a false passport. We also executed a search warrant on your wife's residence and took her into custody. What happens now? They'll both be arraigned tomorrow. Lynn is looking at multiple federal charges and will likely be denied bail as a flight risk. Your wife's situation is more complicated. She's clearly a victim of manipulation, but she's also a willing participant in serious crimes. Will she get bail? Probably, but with restrictions. And frankly, Mr. Granger, she's going to need all the help she can get. Lynn's attorney is already suggesting that she was the mastermind, and he was just following her lead. I wasn't surprised. Trevor was going to try to save himself by destroying Claire completely. The man she'd betrayed her marriage for was about to betray her in return. There's one more thing, Agent Martinez said. We found evidence that Lynn was planning to kill your wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Text messages to an associate in Costa Rica, discussing the need to eliminate loose ends before he fled the country. We think he was planning to murder her and make it look like a suicide, leaving behind a confession that would clear him of all charges. I sat down heavily, my mind reeling. Claire had thought she was playing a sophisticated game of adultery and theft. She'd never realized she was dancing with a psychopath who was planning to kill her. She's safe now, Agent Martinez continued, and this information will be crucial in her sentencing. The judge will take into account that she was being manipulated by someone who was planning to murder her. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Claire had betrayed me in the worst possible way, but she'd also been the victim of a predator who'd used her loneliness and insecurity to commit crimes that could have destroyed both our lives. Trevor Lynn had gotten exactly what he deserved. Claire was about to learn that actions have consequences, and I was finally free from a marriage that had been built on lies. The door Claire had told me would always be open had indeed led somewhere, to the truth, to justice, and to a future where I'd never again have to wonder if the person sleeping next to me was planning my destruction. The arraignment was a media circus. News of the industrial espionage ring had leaked, and reporters packed the courthouse steps, eager for details about the suburban housewife and prominent lawyer who'd been running $1 million information theft operation. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as Claire and Trevor were brought in separately. Claire looked broken, pale, thin, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Trevor, on the other hand, looked defiant, his expensive suit replaced by prison clothes, but his arrogance intact. At the arraignment, Claire faced charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, computer fraud, theft of trade secrets, and money laundering. Trevor added attempted murder and running a criminal enterprise. Claire's bail was $50,000. Trevor's was denied. Our eyes met briefly, hers pleading for forgiveness I couldn't offer. Outside, I told a reporter, "My wife chose betrayal over family. I didn't turn her in. I stopped shielding her from consequences." Claire later offered full cooperation against Trevor for a reduced sentence. In a tense meeting, she admitted Trevor manipulated her vulnerability, discarded her when inconvenient, and planned my murder without her knowledge. I agreed to the deal, demanding she allocute fully in court. She testified truthfully for days, securing Trevor's 45-year sentence. Claire received 6 years, eligible for parole in 4. The civil suit recovered nearly $2 million in restitution. My business rebounded stronger. Lily lives with me full-time, visiting her mother sparingly as they slowly rebuild. The door Claire once mocked as open led not to abandonment, but to truth, justice, and a life rebuilt on honesty, free from betrayal. 100 words.